In this episode, I interview Dr. Eric Wang, who is the Vice President of AI for TurnItIn. TurnItIn's AI writing detection software is used by high schools and colleges, well, everywhere. Their product is used by over 21,000 institutions and 71 million students. The conversation was surprisingly nuanced. Eric emphasized that their primary goal was not busting students. Instead, Eric imagines Turnitin acting as a bridge to a future where AI is embraced as an accepted part of the writing process. Do you ever think of yourself like Deckard and Blade Runner out there trying to detect, which people are replicants versus which people are real?
So the answer is no. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I think in the age of AI, when we think about academic integrity, we got to be thinking about moving from "I gotcha"
Right.
to "I got you"
Right.
as a teacher and a student. I got you.
Yeah.
This is a crazy world. I'm here for you. We got this together.
Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We have several super interesting episodes coming up on topics such as AI and healthcare, AI and education, and AI and consciousness.
This is the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast with your host, Stephen Walther, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm super excited today to have Dr. Eric Wang with us. Dr. Eric Wang is the Vice President of AI at TurnItIn, where he focuses on developing AI to improve teaching, feedback, and academic integrity at over 16,000 educational institutions, reaching over 40 million students. He has over 15 years of hands-on and executive leadership experience in AI across academia, government research, and technology industries. His recent media features include NBC Nightly News, New York Times, Wired, Insider, the No Such Thing podcast, and EdSurge. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, awesome. I'm going to just dive right in and ask the big question. Can you give us a quick introduction to what is TurnItIn's AI writing detection software? What does it do?
Yeah. So I think to answer that, it's important to think about and learn a little bit about TurnItIn's history. So TurnItIn has been around for about 25 years, a little over 25 years. And we actually we're actually used by about 21,000 institutions worldwide, 71 million students, 185 countries. So yeah, the intro, which was great, by the way, the number is actually slightly out of date.
Nice. I know, by the way, like my children are all in high school, and I know the Seattle school systems, they use TurnItIn. So I know, yeah. So I know it's used everywhere.
And I think it's important to, because of that, when we build something new, we have to be very thoughtful and deliberate and responsible with what we do. So when on November 30th, 2023, one of my favorite phrases is things got weird because the internet all of a sudden started talking to us.
Uh-huh.
Up to that point, generative AI was something that we were aware of. We've been looking at it and thinking about the impact it was going to have on academic integrity for about 3 years. And we built a series of detectors, really, that increasingly could understand how these LLMs write. When ChatGPT came out and everyone recognized that, oh yeah, we've entered a whole new world, we worked very quickly to bring the most powerful of those detectors to production. And that forms the core of what we call the AI writing detection product that is in TurnItIn today. At its core, it is a transformer-based text classifier. It uses transformers, which is the same deep learning neural network architecture that's in GPT, well, pretty much all the LLMs. So it understands text in the exact same way that state-of-the-art LMs understands text. But unlike LMs on the output side, instead of outputting more text, it outputs a signal that says, this feels like AI. This has the consistent statistical signature over a span of text of something that was AI written. And I can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. As a product, it's wrapped up in a product that's really designed to support effective conversations between teachers and students in the age of AI. It is not meant, we didn't want to build a product that says, I am going to bust you. Because we live in the age of AI, and AI predictive systems are by nature imperfect. They can be very, very good like ours, and still we have to recognize that they're imperfect. And B, this amazing new technology, its use case doesn't automatically make it bad. So using it should be about bringing visibility, transparency, facilitating good conversation. So that's what it's meant to do. It gives the teachers a sense of how much AI writing is in a document. And then when they actually click into the product itself, they can sort of see where in the document those signals are most prevalent. What's really driving the percentage, indicator that they see. And that allows them to have really targeted, meaningful, and insightful conversations.
That's something I'd really like to get into more later in the conversation, because I think that's as I mentioned, my children are in high school. They're always, worried about, getting busted for AI use. It's obviously been a big change in the way that people do homework. I wonder, I'm just going to throw this out here. Do you ever think of yourself like Deckard and Blade Runner out there trying to detect, which people are replicants versus which people are real? Is that kind of the way you think of your role, or do you think of it in a different way?
Yeah. It's just every day we show up to work and it's like seeing ships glow in the night on the Tannhauser Gate. That's a deep cut Blade Runner reference.
That's very cool.
There's a lot of people that are not going to understand that.
I don't get that reference. That's too deep for me, but I appreciate your knowledge of science fiction films.
So the answer is no. Again, I think in the age of AI, when we think about academic integrity, we got to be thinking about moving from I gotcha to I got you as a teacher and a student. I got you. Yeah. This is a crazy world. I'm here for you. We got this together. But in order to have that conversation, to build that trust and relationship, both parties, the teacher, the student, the institution, you got to say, look, there's visibility, there's trust, and we need to use a tool that helps give us that visibility. And that's why we felt like it was so important to bring something like this to market first. There's a lot of other cool stuff that we're doing. I'd love to talk about it. But the reason we started tackling this first was not because we said, we got to bust all the cheaters. Right. Because using AI, you're not cheating. It's a powerful tool. You got to use it. You got to learn how to use it. But using it well requires visibility. Right. And that's where we started.
Okay. I was going to delay this conversation, but I'm too fascinated with it. So I think we should dive right into. So I guess the question for me is, because the other big thing that TurnItIn does is like plagiarism detection, which is, super useful. That's clearly, I think, a form of like stealing. This was something I'm sure is made a lot worse by the creation of the internet, where everyone can go off and just get answers to things or grab other people's essays. One of the things that I'm curious about, do you think of AI assisted writing as a form of plagiarism? Or I'm not quite sure how to think of it. And just to throw out here, I actually wrote down the definition of plagiarism. I looked it up from the dictionary.
Sure. And
it says, the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. And so I'm curious, is AI writing, if a student goes to ChatGPT and they generate some stuff, do you think that's fairly considered plagiarism, or is that something different?
So I'm going to start with a mildly corporate preface here, which is, we're not in the business of defining intent.
Sure.
But in my personal view is that it isn't necessarily plagiarism, but it could be an academic integrity, academic misconduct situation if the technology is used when teachers have said, hey, I really would like you to not use this technology. And so, again, I think that using AI to help ideate, to help draft And even when it's allowed or where it makes sense to even write that last mile final draft, as long as that's done with transparency, as long as that's done out in the open, hey, I use this amazing technology to help convey my ideas, right? My argument, to help practice critical thinking. I think there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, AI augmented thinking and ideation is probably going to be the norm in our future. And anything we can do as educators to really support that type of learning feels valid. It feels like the right direction.
I mean, this feels very challenging to me because, I mean, schools immediately banned the use of generative AI. The New York public school system, LA public school system. I think even in Seattle initially we were banning it. I know they've reversed a little bit. I mean, like New York is now allowing people to use generative AI. But I think the introduction of AI was immediately, met with fear about, oh my God, we can't actually tell whether people are doing their homework or not anymore. And I know, again, I have children in school, and I know that, pretty much everyone's using AI to generate a lot of their homework because it's right there. I mean, you get you're supposed to, do 50 math problems and got to turn it in tomorrow. It's such a temptation. And, it gets the answers right most of the time. And it's really hard for teachers to know when AI is being used to generate homework versus, if people are doing it on their own.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's either it seems like, we have to really, double down on tools like the tool that your company creates, like TurnItIn, and there's sort of an arms race that we have to get into with students, which it sounds like you don't like this arms race idea because we don't really want to be, we don't want them to feel like we're just trying to bust them. And, and I get that. And I appreciate that. But on the other hand, it feels kind of strange too, to just sort of fully embrace the idea that we won't have homework. So I guess that was a very long lead up to the question of, do you think that at a certain point that we're just going to give up on having homework that we give children anymore, or, having our children learn to write essays and just, embrace the idea that everyone's going to be using AI in the future to create content? I mean, I admit almost all my emails now I send off, I run it through AI. I have it improve it. My daughter, recently, she resigned from her first job. It was nice. She was working at a grocery store, and she wanted to write a very professional resignation email, and she ran it through AI, and it wrote something much more mature than she could have written. I mean, my daughter's super mature, but it's the kind of thing where it said, oh, I'm willing to, train the next person, and all sorts of stuff that probably a high school student wouldn't have thought of. And it just, it was so much better than she could have written. And I feel like that's a good thing rather than a bad thing, but it's also a little weird because it's also not authentic and not something that she's creating. So I guess I'm struggling with how do we think about AI assisted content, and how do we think about where is the right way to use tools like TurnItIn in sort of evaluating AI assisted content?
Yeah, I think, oh man. I think you asked 7 questions nested together.
Yeah.
No. I think I love it. I mean, it's how I think. So I guess I'll try to unpack it. Tools like Turnitin, I keep going back to this. It's a diagnostic tool to provide insight and context, right? So we're experts at really identifying these signals, reconstructing them, putting them together in a digestible way for teachers to then make that next set of decisions on. And next set of decisions are some of the things you talked about. What's the right way to use AI? Well, that matters, but depending on context. So you gave some great examples. Someone writing a resignation email for their first job, that's nerve-wracking. They're staring at a blank cursor and they're like, what do I do? I need something to help me scaffold my thoughts. That's a potentially great use where the AI says, hey, here's some ideas on how you can frame it. And maybe they take it more whole cloth. But I would suspect that as your daughter matures and finds her own voice as she grows as a human being, she'll be able to say, I like the AI's ideas, but I'm going to kind of, I have my own voice. I'm going to take those ideas, I'm going to massage it, and it becomes something that belongs to her, but has its genesis in this kind of augmented realm, right? And I think that'll increasingly be the norm. On the other hand, yeah, I mean, if there are clearly use cases in writing, in mathematics, and STEM where we think we need you to practice a pure human effort. We need to see the warts. We need to see the struggle, right? You need to practice the productive struggle. I sometimes call it, the blinking cursor panic, right?
Right.
You and I have both been writers at one point, at different points in our lives, and you're sitting there looking at a blank page, cursor's blinking, and you just work yourself up into a anxious ball of nerves, right? That's normal, and I think we all need to practice that without AI, without assistance, so that we get used to the idea of creation, creating new ideas, get the idea of kind of being comfortable, kind of sitting with our own thoughts, with our own style. I think those. So clearly, there are places where we don't want AI to live, and across that entire spectrum, great use cases, all the way to places maybe we don't want them as a part of the learning process. Again, you need a diagnostic tool that says, "Here's what I think happened," and it's up to you, teacher, then to take that information, blend it with all of the other intellect and that relationship you have with a student, your curriculum, your knowledge of what it is you're trying to achieve, and make a judgment call on what do we do next? Did something bad happen? Or is this a teachable moment? Or do I reinforce the fact that they did something really great, right? All of those are made better with good information and insight.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I do want to emphasize actually how I was impressed. Actually, I did some background research on TurnItIn. I was impressed on the level of accuracy that TurnItIn has. I mean, you cite on your website a research paper where you show, what was it? That you were able to correctly identify AI or human generated status of all 106 documents with no incorrect or uncertain responses. I've watched some of your other videos where you've talked about, somewhere below a 1%, error rate, which is very impressive, actually, I have to say.
Thank you.
But it still sort of opens up the question. I mean, there is false positives still, and
Sure.
there still has to have that conversation. I'm just trying to imagine how a teacher deals with that, because they're getting the information. Yeah, there's a high likelihood that, these sections of this essay or this essay was written by AI, and how a teacher can respond to that open up a discussion. And I mean, I guess if it is a discussion, that's okay. But how does a teacher actually take that information, given that they know it's not perfect, and start a conversation with a student?
So I think in the age of AI, we need to you can't put all the responsibility on the teacher's shoulders, right? They are running a classroom. They're focused on building those relationships with the students. I think you need to start one level higher, which is at the policy level of the institution, whether it's a university or K-12 district. Is your belief that using AI, does that automatically constitute an academic integrity violation? Or is it even in the gray area where using AI is an academic integrity violation? Because if it is, and often it is, a lot of these academic integrity policies are, I was talking to some districts where their policies were from literally before the internet became mainstream, right? They said, I haven't updated in 30 years. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then the moment a teacher says, hey, Stephen, I think it looks like maybe you used AI on this paragraph. Can we talk about that? The implication is something is wrong. You're going to bust me, right? But if the policy is thoughtful, it's compassionate, it's reflective of reality today where these amazing, wondrous technologies exist, that same conversation, hey, Stephen, it looks like maybe you used AI here, becomes, oh, I might get some feedback. I'm I don't have to hide. I don't have to immediately go into denial mode in this adversarial relationship. It's my base assumption is okay. My teacher might have some feedback on how I used AI here. Just like when we were in school, I remember teachers telling me back in the early days of Wikipedia, you can't use Wikipedia. I'm not saying your information's wrong, and I'm not saying you cheated or you copied, but you cited Wikipedia, and I just don't think that's reliable. I don't necessarily know if that's the case today, but at least it was back then. And so for me, it became very clear right away, oh, there's a right way and a wrong way to use Wikipedia, this amazing body of knowledge. I think we kind of need to move in that direction. And so when you do, the idea that, hey, sometimes these machines, not often, but sometimes these machines don't agree with humans, or don't, maybe they have a false positive occasionally. That becomes, it sort of defangs that problem, because you're going from I gotcha to we got this. Let's work on this together. I think the other thing that comes down to it as well is, I think in the age of AI, we have to start thinking about a statistical world, which then every single decision we make has to leave room for uncertainty.
Yep.
Right. It has to leave room for that discussion. And that's a broader set of conversations we need to have as educators, as a society. I think we kind of view artificial intelligence as like, it must automatically be good because it's a computer. And that's not true.
Are you thinking here kind of a human in the loop co-pilot idea that we can only give AI a certain amount of trust? We still want to review what it's doing, or is it more like it's just a different way about thinking about the way that, because right now, computers provide certainty. They're usually like doing database queries or whatever. They're only used in very narrow domains where they can give very certain answers. I guess I'd like to dive in a little more on what you're thinking of there.
I think that most people will recognize, and actually we're already seeing that. I would argue, even in TurnItIn's own data, I would argue that most people have recognized or starting to recognize where the value of these machines are. And I think more and more people are recognizing the value of this type of AI really is upstream. That last mile writing, actually committing words to paper, it turns out, if you actually think about it, that's not the most time consuming thing. Like, yeah, you have to type along, and you can only type so fast. But I think what's overwhelming to student writers and seasoned writers alike is actually that upstream part, that getting started, organizing your ideas.
Yep.
And now you have a tool that, I do this all the time, where I literally will just splatter my ideas onto the page. Actually, more and more, I'm using the voice. I literally just ramble to it, and it patiently listens to me. And then I say, can you put these ideas together in some way that makes sense? Here's what I'm trying to do with these ideas. And more often than not, it gives me a really nice organization, scaffolding of ideas. If you were to present it to this audience, here's some ways you could try organizing it. And most of the time I think to myself, oh, holy cow, this is good. I can use this. And then I can move on to more mechanical typing things, which I tend to do a little bit more of myself. And the reason I say, I think more and more people are starting to recognize that value is that we're looking at our internal AI writing statistics. Our detectors out there, it's running, and that percentage it leapt up right away, and then it's just hanging out around 11-12%. Last time I checked, and so what that says is we've reached saturation. There's probably about 10, 11, 12, maybe 15% of people of writing where it's going to be, AI, just write this for me.
Yeah.
And the other chunk, we know AI is being used through the other chunk, but my guess is it's being used more upstream, and those signals aren't visible in that last mile where the teacher's grading, which is good. To me, I think to myself, this is great. People are actually using it to help, create, which I think is its sweet spot.
Huh. I guess I'm not sure how to think about that, because going back to That's a really interesting idea because it's almost like a undetectable plagiarism in a way where you're using an AI to generate your ideas and help you organize your thoughts, but it's not in the expression of the thoughts. But it's still it gives a benefit to people who have access to technology that perhaps other people don't. And so I guess I'm trying to get my mind around that. I mean, if you have a policy in a school system to not use generative AI, but you're using generative AI for the sorts of scenarios that you're talking about to sort of like, you know,
Yeah.
help you think through things, like, have organize an essay in the way that you're talking about, but then you go through the actual writing process, you're still leveraging that tool. You're just leveraging it in a different way. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure it's good to do that, because I thought you were going to go in another direction on that, because I've heard a lot of people say, hey, but we want to make sure that students write essays so they learn how to organize thoughts on their own, so that they build that essential skill.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, having the AI help you, at least initially, to start thinking about how to organize thoughts and how to create more is super valuable. But I guess, that goes back to the general struggle that I'm having with how do we like fit in what we're trying to do and I guess I'm going to throw one of your own quotes back at you, because
Sure.
I'm curious. I actually, by the way, really enjoyed, you have a few articles out there on that I enjoyed reading through, which I was, tackled some of the philosophical aspects of using AI. So I found those super valuable. But one of the statements leapt out at me. You write at one place, if AI can write a 500-word summary about the Battle of the Bulge, and it can, by the way, what is the point of taking time to learn all that information? If AI can drive you to work, why learn to drive? If AI can explain calculus, why take calculus? I thought that was a really interesting statement. And I think now we're getting more into the question of what are we trying to accomplish in school? At the end of the day, what are we what do we want students to be able to do at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
I think you're pointing to, there is this now future that's coming into focus pretty hard, that where we don't think that we'll have people generating content in the same way that we've done over the last, I don't know, 1,000 years or whatever, where there will be co-piloting with AIs all over the place. I don't know. I guess the first question is, do you think that's a overly optimistic look at AI, or do you think that, I don't know. I'm very curious about what your intent was with that paragraph. What were you thinking?
So if you think about what we ask students to do in school, we ask students and we teach them to do very mechanized tasks. And I think we exist in a society where most people do complex mechanized tasks. Mechanized doesn't necessarily mean it's, we're operating a machine. Mechanized can be, to me, means repetitive, means, it may be complex. It may require a degree of critical thinking. But if you think about an organization, we've all worked in big companies or organizations where if someone leaves for another opportunity and you think to yourself, boy, I really like them. I'm going to go backfill them. That role was really critical, but I don't need to reorganize my organization to backfill their skills. That's a mechanized set of skills. Whereas we've also all worked with people where when they left for another opportunity, you think to yourself, oh boy, whoever comes in, I'm going to need to reorg my whole, organization around this new person. And what that tells you is there was a set of human to human connectivity, compassion, collaboration, empathy, creativity, right? All of those sparks of humanness that machines don't have. The current generation of LMs that we see, as far as we can tell, don't have. And I'm actually, in some ways, I would say even more optimistic than you. I think the AI future is a world where it's actually okay and it's encouraged and it's valuable to be more human. The skills that really matter are are we able to have more conversations like the one you and I are having, right? An empathetic, compassionate, open dialogue where there's genuine curiosity. There's real struggle with ideas back and forth. And I think ultimately, I hope you feel the same way. We arrive at a place where we both take away and we're like, I have something to think about. I've evolved in my thinking. Those moments, I would like to see more of, because I think those are when you see sparks of creativity, of innovation, of real advancement in society. I think it's in those human connections. At the same time, the article that you referenced, I believe it was a built-in article. The world changed really fast. I mean, it's been a heck of a decade in the last 12 months, right? And I'm not gonna. Certainly, there are people who are far smarter than I am. I'm not gonna. I can look at things through the lens of an AI leader, and then I put on my very human hat, and I think about experiencing this change and the AI revolution in a very human lens as Eric, not as a vice president of AI. And I'm filled with as much wonder as anybody else, right? And when I wrote that article, I really was grappling with the idea of what is the role of humanity in the future? And that idea actually has matured a lot since I've written that. I think it is still really important for people to learn these core skills. We still will need to build tools and capabilities to allow people to prove that real human effort was put in. So, this is not advertising, but just kind of, pulling back the hood a little bit. In the next year, we're going to have a product that's really designed to help give teachers a way to look at how work was created, the provenance of work, right? And that tool is going to be able to help tell you, hey, an LLM may have been used in the process of creating this work, which again, might be cool, might be totally okay. And also that might, on the other hand, you might say, well, I probably shouldn't have used that tool. I really would like them not to. So it's going to give teachers the ability to see whether critical thinking was used in the process, whether effort was really used in the process. So it's going to allow teachers to give feedback on process, which is ultimately, in many ways, the holy grail of feedback. And I think it's going to give students the ability to say, look, I did put in a best human effort, a best self-driven effort, and I know I can prove it. I have that breadcrumb trail. And on top of that, I can get feedback on my process, because it's one thing to get feedback on your final draft. Hey, Stephen, paragraph 2 was great. It's another thing to say, paragraph 2 was great. But the reason paragraph 2 was great is because you had this idea that you took out later, but you brought it back because you recognized how it fit into the broader argument. I love how you did that. Do that again, right? Those are same feedback on the surface, but very different from a pedagogical perspective.
That's very interesting. And so I'm making guesses here, but it sounds like this product will allow you to look at sort of the revision history, look at the process the student went through to be able to create, their essay, and use that. That's a very interesting response, because I've had other podcasts with like leaders in education and AI, and some of them have been very radical about there's going to be no homework in the future because we can't, we can't detect whether it was AI generated. So everything will be testing, or, some other views. But it sounds like this is another kind of like avenue that might open up the ability to continue to do homework in the future if we have a way to figure out how much of the homework was human generated, student generated versus AI generated. Am I understanding?
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the tool itself it's very AI enabled. It the vision has a lot of AI assistance, scaffolded guardrail AI assistance, of course, but AI assistance for both the student and the teacher. It's going to give, it's going to be able to say, look, you need to learn to use AI as a student. So we're going to give you a tool that also scaffolds that AI use. It's going to be transparent to the teacher. The teacher, obviously, I'm not going to hand you a stack of revisions and ask you to read them all. That's nuts. So we're going to have our AI systems be able to give you the TLDR of, hey, you're reading this paper. I can actually tell you where these ideas came from. I can tell you the story of this paragraph, right? I also think, to this point, you keep circling back to this, and I really like it. I'm going to say something a little bit maybe at odds. I actually think there is a world where there's more homework and less school, because you look at, Sal Khan recently had this amazing talk where he showed off what Khan Academy's new AI systems can do, right? And it's almost like Socratic tutoring for every student. Now, I think there's still some R&D left before we get there, but I do think we're getting closer to a world where we're not as dependent on this world of 12 years of primary school, somewhere between 4 to 6 to 8 years of, college, graduate school, and then bam, you're done. Go, you're finished, and go do stuff now, right? And I think we now have the real opportunity to scale learning, to recognize that, hey, you're a human. You're capable of learning from the day you're born until, the end of a very fruitful career, and beyond, right? And we didn't have the resources before. Teaching is hard, but now the ability to say, I want to go explore this, and I want something to challenge me, to give me challenges that help me grow in a way that doesn't frustrate me. We're awfully close to that future. And so as educators, I think we need to be thinking about curriculum, about institutional design, about the role of education across a lifetime. And what does integrity look like when we start measuring for things like, are you curious? If you're going to hire someone, it starts to matter a little bit less. How fast can you code? Well, if the AI could code faster than the best Java coder in the world, that may not be the most important measure. What matters is, okay, you know how to code Java pretty well, but you're really good at system design. You're really good at crafting a vision, getting people inspired and bought in, and creating this architecture, and leading a hybrid team of AI and humans to go build something that is bigger than any single one of us, right? Those skills become important. We don't know how to assess for that. Yeah. We don't know how to build that confidence, that ability. So I think those are the bigger questions that we need to be thinking about as educators.
That's very interesting. So all coders will become managers in the future, or, it's potentially, because it's more of a lot of, because I do a lot of coding. I use VS Code and Copilot, and, it shocks me sometimes how much it can anticipate the code I'm writing. It'll just spew out huge amounts of code for me and functions, anticipating what I want to write. And I know, this is still evolving, but it's interesting, this idea that, I think that this might be a theme that I've seen across a bunch of podcasts. I'm saying that, we're moving from sort of a creator age into an evaluator age. We're moving from sort of an age of like, humans focus on producing content to more like managing content that AI is producing, or evaluating the value of content. And I'm excited about what you're talking about, like, changes in education, and maybe having, I don't know, having AI more, sort of supporting students in a way that teachers just can't right now because of the, amount of demands on a teacher. And so I think and I think this ties into the initial discussion about like what TurnItIn is trying to do. Because if we're entering this new age of AI, we definitely don't want, we don't want to bust people for using AI all the time. Exactly. That's not sustainable. No one likes that. It puts everyone in a bad position. But it sounds like that's not what you're trying to do. It sounds like what you're trying to do is come up with ways to leverage AI in this new world of AI so that it can help students with homework, help students with, potentially testing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that, if you think about TurnItIn and our history, we have our roots. You mentioned this earlier. We have our roots in figuring out when plagiarism, real copy paste, might have happened. We've also done, we also have a really great product for contract cheating where, you hire someone to go write your essay for you. That was kind of a big deal there for a few years.
Yeah.
And I think that, the AI writing system, which is where we started our conversation today, to me, I look at that as that's a bridge. That is, we still have to recognize that schools are doing the best they can. They may have very outdated policies. That's not because they don't care about the policy. It's just schools are, like you said, they have way too much to do. They're just trying to find their way forward and do right by the kids. We have to recognize that world still exists. I can't just sweep it under the rug, do the Silicon Valley thing and be like, move fast, break things, right? Like there are real kids going to
Right.
real school that we got to, and real teachers that we need to support. But we also need to start building that bridge to that future, which says, hey, this assignment, you're still going to have people write. You're still going to have people do homework. You're still going to have them do the same things. But you're going to want that breadcrumb trail to understand how it came about. You're going to want to understand thought process. And we can actually help you, give you superpowers to examine and explore and give feedback on that thought process in ways that you never could before. And oh, by the way, that also helps facilitate this new kind of academic integrity. That's not so much about, did you do something wrong trying to game the system? And more about, hey, the future, your contribution to society, your ability to really to reach your full potential is going to rest in your ability to create original thought, to manage sources of knowledge and machines of knowledge, and to sort of be able to curate and synthesize at that higher level new original innovations for society, big and small. That's the future. And so for us, we really see it as like, we need to make sure we're still supporting the world today. We need to make sure we're building that bridge so that schools can say, yeah, here's the pathway to where we can go. And we need to, prognosticate a little bit and kind of say, what do we think? Where do we think we're going to land? What kind of world do we want to create? And what kind of transformation do we want to drive, and sort of build the products that when we get there, when those first schools, sort of walk across that bridge and they're like, whoa, where am I? We say, hey, we're still figuring this out, but we've got some of it figured out. And here's some tools that might be really helpful for you.
So I'm a superintendent at a school, or even for that matter, teacher. I'm overwhelmed by all this generative AI stuff. What's the best way for me to learn about this? And what's the best way for me to start? I mean, I think we want to move away from this sort of fear-based response to AI to sort of a more productive engagement with it. What are the resources that you would recommend? Like if a school district or or even a college university, administrator, how should they be learning about this stuff, and how should they start thinking about forming AI policies?
Yeah. So the first place that to me I think of, and again, this is because I'm involved. So TurnItIn actually releases a lot of resources. We have a fantastic Teach, Learn, Innovate team comprised of former educators, school leaders, teachers with a lot of classroom experience, who they're at TurnItIn, and they come together and they work with all the technologists, the engineers, the product folks, and they put out a lot of resources that talk about here's how we're thinking about AI. Being at a company that's at the frontier of this, here's how we're thinking about AI and its role in the classroom, both today and in the near future, and where we might be going in the future. So they've written a lot of really thoughtful and insightful articles. I would start there. I think another, at the same time, I think experience, you can't beat doing. And one of the most amazing advancements, I think, to LMs, and I use this, I literally use this at least, for hours a day. If you have ChatGPT Pro or Plus, whatever it's called, the subscription, you can download a little app and you can turn on the voice. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to do this or not, but I turn on the microphone and it just listens to you. And you can have this very natural conversation. And in the background, it's searching the web. I mean, it is no different than typing to ChatGPT, right? But it's voice and it's talking back to you. You can talk to it. And to me, that was the first time I really started to explore it was as big a watershed moment as, using ChatGPT for the first time back in November of 23. The idea of being able to sit back and process its thoughts at the speed of speech, which is slower. It gives your brain time to reflect on what's being said to you. It gives you time to predict what's coming. You're not using your eyes to scan, multiple lines of text and it's coming at you faster than you can read. You can kind of sit back and you can imagine you're just talking to someone who is very reasonable, very intuitive, has access to a lot of information. I would say I would tell people to start building that into their day. A few minutes at a time, you'll start to discover magic moments. You'll start to discover like, oh, holy crap, holy cow. I guess we can edit it out. Or we'll just have AI edit it out for us. But
yeah, that's right.
You'll start to discover, I had a thought and I said it to the AI, and the AI kind of said, well, here's what I heard you say. And let me add to that. And you're going to think to yourself, that's really good. Oh, that's really good. Let me riff on that with the AI. And you'll be 15 minutes in to have your conversation. And suddenly you think to yourself, I just spent 15 minutes having a really pleasant, meaningful conversation with AI that's augmented my own thinking. And that's, for me, that's the light bulb moment. That's like, it changes everything. I don't need a screen, right? I can a brain and a speaker and a microphone, and I can, I'm smarter. I'm more capable than I could be without that. So those are, there's so many great resources, by the way, but I think those are two places where, if you don't want to get overwhelmed, two actions that I think folks could take today that would really start to make concrete some of this overwhelming, tidal wave of change.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing those. Well, any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts? Any advice that you would give people in the audience? Anything that you would want them to know?
I think it's important to remember that ultimately everything we're doing, every decision we make should, still be in service of improving society, improving people. And these computers, as brilliant as they are, as smart as they are, as intuitive and almost human-like as they sound, they're not people. I mean, maybe I'll get flamed on the internet for this. They're not conscious, right? So what matters ultimately is, are we doing things that build human connections? Are we helping to teach creates the wrong word, helping to teach and encourage more empathy and more compassion and more ability to see things from other people's views? Are we creating, are we rewarding creativity, right? Risk-taking. Because I really do feel like those are going to be the skills that the students of today should be really accumulating, because they'll be valuable in the future. And that feels different than the world that you and I grew up in, which is, the skills are competence and, sort of the ability to execute complex mechanical things with very high precision, efficiently, right? Those are still important. I'm not saying we stop teaching those. Those are still really important things to learn. But I think the pendulum starts to shift a little bit, where it's a little bit more balanced. And I don't think we're quite ready for that. So the advice I would give is just really lean into some of these things that are a little underweight right now. And how can we continue to improve that? I think it'll have big reverberations for our world as well, if we can all start to be a little bit more empathetic, compassionate, creative, joyful.
Well, that's a very positive note. Let's stop there. And I want to say how much I appreciate you taking time today to do this. This is a really interesting discussion. I think it went in some surprising directions. So I'm really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through it.
Absolutely, Stephen. It was a pleasure. And I hope we get to do this again soon.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for joining us for the OpenAI Changes Everything podcast, where we explore how OpenAI is transforming the future of humanity. Please remember to subscribe to ensure that you receive future episodes.